In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you the ETF that has made me the most money since I started investing in it back in the springtime of 2022. This ETF is up over 50% in the last year and has 5-year annualized returns of over 26%. Hello, my name is Rachel and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be covering in great detail the iShares S&P 500 Information Technology Sector ETF. So this is the technology stocks taken from the S&P 500. So 67 different holdings within this ETF. And for this video, I have taken a look at each and every one of the holdings within this ETF. And there's actually 5 holdings in this ETF that have achieved over 100% in the last year or more. So later on in the video, I'll be covering all of those 5 different stocks. In this video, I'm going to be covering all of the downfalls and pitfalls with this ETF, as well as obviously covering the positives. So let's get started. So the code for this ETF is IITU. And just to illustrate those gains over the last year, had you invested £1,000 a year ago, your £1,000 would now be worth £1,499 today. Now this is an accumulating ETF, which simply means that any dividends are reinvested into that ETF. So I'm going to very quickly compare it to Vanguard's VUAG, which is the accumulating S&P 500 ETF. Had you invested £1,000 into that ETF, today it would be worth £1,278. So you're comparing that to the £1,499 that you would have today had you invested in IITU. This ETF has achieved 5-year annualized returns of over 26%. So obviously when you're making investments in ETFs, your capital is at risk, and obviously over time you will see peaks and you will also see troughs. So 5-year annualized returns simply represent the average return over 5 years for a single year, which is 26.80%. So the ongoing charge for this ETF is 0.15%, which is very affordable, and the 3-year standard deviation is 19.33. Now when we're looking at standard deviation, what you ideally want to be seeing is lower numbers. A lower standard deviation indicates a lower level of risk. So say for example, if we're going to compare this to Vanguard's S&P 500, the 3-year standard deviation for this ETF is 12.06. So the S&P 500 is obviously the top 500 companies in the US, whereas the ETF that I'm talking about in this video is the 67 technology stocks taken from the S&P 500. So with the IITU ETF, you're seeing a much higher standard deviation of 19.33. So this is a much riskier investment than simply investing in the S&P 500. So with the S&P 500, you're getting 500 different stocks, whereas when you're investing in IITU, you're only getting 67 different stocks. And this becomes even more interesting when we take a look in detail at the holdings within the ETF. So both of these ETFs have their top 3 holdings as Microsoft, Apple, and Nvidia. But what's really interesting to compare here is how much is the top 10 or top 3 holdings making up percentage-wise of each of these ETFs. And here you will see a massive difference. So for IITU, the top 10 holdings are Microsoft, Apple, Nvidia, Broadcom, Advanced Micro Devices, Adobe, Salesforce, Oracle Corp, Qualcomm Inc., and Applied Materials Inc. Obviously they are all tech stocks, but actually the top 5 holdings make up a whopping 67% of this portfolio. So you'll see that they're very concentrated in those top 5 holdings, with Microsoft making up a whopping 22% of this ETF. Top 10 holdings as a whole make up 75% of this portfolio. So the remaining holdings are only making up 25% of this portfolio. Whereas if you compare that to the S&P 500, the top 5 holdings are only making up 25% of that ETF, and the top 10 holdings are making up 34% of that ETF. Microsoft is only making up 6.96% of Vanguard's S&P 500 ETF. So what I will say with IITU, and something to be very cautious of, is that as I said, those top holdings are very condensed, with 75% of the portfolio being held in just 10 different stocks. Now, obviously investing in IITU is a much riskier option than investing in something like an S&P 500 ETF or even a FTSE All-World ETF. I personally would make the decision not to have IITU as my own holding. I do, as I said, currently hold IITU, but it is part of a greater, more diverse portfolio, and I certainly wouldn't be looking to hold it in isolation. There's obviously also concerns in terms of investing in tech that the dot-com bubble might repeat itself. At present, it's felt that tech stocks are more modestly valued now than at the peak of the dot-com bubble. However, there is always a risk when you are investing, and as the standard deviation shows as a measure of risk, with a 3-year standard deviation of 19.33, we can see clearly that the level of risk is much higher with investing in IITU. Arguably, what you're looking for with IITU is higher levels of risk, hopefully giving you higher levels of return, but we cannot predict into the future. Past returns are not indicative of future returns. So with investing, particularly if you are choosing to make more volatile investments, it is better to be looking at a time horizon of a minimum of 5 years so that you can really ride out those peaks and troughs. So now let's look at 5 stocks that are in this ETF that have achieved returns of over 100% in the last year. Some of them make up a very small percentage of this ETF, and some of them make up a much larger one and will be much more responsible for the huge gains that this ETF has seen in the last year. So coming in with the first one, and that is Broadcom. The 1-year increase for this stock is 108%, and it's a semiconductor manufacturing company. The second stock that's achieved over 100% return in the last year is Western Digital. That has achieved a return again of 108%, and this company provides tech storage solutions. The next company is Micron Technology, which has achieved a return of 117% in the last year. Again, this is memory and storage technology. The next stock that I wanted to include is Arista Networks. The 1-year increase for this stock is 136%. Arista Networks provides client-to-cloud networking. And then finally, it may come as no surprise to you, the next stock is Nvidia, which is up over 206% in the last year. Nvidia produces graphics processing units, wireless comms devices, and automotive hardware and software. And if we quickly pop back to the spreadsheet that I included, you will see that 17.61% of the IITU ETF is made up of Nvidia. So the fact that Nvidia has made over 206% in the last year will certainly be having a big impact on that increase of over 50% in this IITU ETF in the last year. I just wanted to mention quickly that there is an alternative to the iShares S&P 500 Information Technology Sector ETF, and that comes from Invesco, the Invesco Technology S&P 500 US Select Sector ETF. This is a very similar ETF with a fee of 0.14%. So instead of the 0.15% that you're seeing with IITU, they are very similar ETFs. So if you want to check that one out, then please do. What I will say is that is not an ETF that I have been invested in. So in this video, I am specifically talking about IITU because that is the ETF that has made me the most money in the last couple of years. But if you're looking for a similar alternative with Invesco, then it might be worth checking out XLKQ. So as always, please go ahead and do all of your own research when you're choosing the investments that you want to make. Your risk tolerance is going to be very different to mine. Your goals are going to be different to mine. You might be planning on investing to eventually buy a house in a few years, hopefully more than 5 years, or it might be better to be putting your money into a high interest savings account rather than investing, or you might be hoping to retire soon, or you might be hoping to retire in 20 years. So please make sure when you're choosing the investments that you want to make that they are right for you and that you understand them in a good level of detail before making any investments, because obviously your capital is always at risk. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know in the comments down below if you're invested in this ETF or if you have any other ETFs that you think are better than this one. Obviously, there are going to be tons of ETFs that are better than this one, but for me personally, this has performed fantastically and I have been very happy with the returns that I've seen. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and have a really lovely day. Bye bye.